The text this morning, like I said, it's pretty obvious truth, right? Like at least it should be. That, it's the older should teach the young, the parents should teach the kids. There's a lot of truth in that. Parents should run the household. There's a lot of truth in that. Parents should teach kids. Kids should listen. Kids should listen and respect and honor their parents. I feel lame saying this stuff, but come on. I mean, it's an obvious truth. We know these things, right? Parents should teach kids to be wise. They should impart wisdom on them. If everything works how it should, if the parents do what they should, then the kids, they'll be wise because they listen to parents. And the parents will be proud. But for some reason, that's not happening. And in Proverbs, it's a fascinating book. A few verses above, it seems like we're just guessing, but it seems like a lot of this section of Proverbs is a training manual for young men who are going into the service of the king, young men who are going to be in some kind of civil service. But then about where we're at, just a few verses above the text that Cody Bob just read, kind of switches into how to homeschool, how to teach your kids at home. And so as we're keeping score this morning, it is very clear older should be in charge, teach the younger. It's really all over Proverbs. The opening of Proverbs is written as if it was an older man teaching a younger man. So again, the point's going to go to the old folks here. It's not looking good, kids. It is not looking good. But if you look at this verse just a few down, there's this lovely verse it's dangerous to preach on. And I've made a slide for it here, Proverbs 23, 13, and 14. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they're not going to die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. Wow. I read it half humorously, and I think the text it's actually meant half humorously. Kind of like the whole thing. You probably said it to your kids, but did you die? But did you die? And really the reason this is even written is because even then people were like, hey, should we be doing this? Like, is this okay? But as far as the rod goes, I don't know about that, okay? I'm not getting into that. This is one of those things where this is not a text I want to stand up here and have in the background. You guys know, if you know me, you know I would never run for public office. But if I did, someone's digging up this moment right now. And they're going to be like, Brady Horner wants you to beat your children. That's, hey, do you really want to vote for that guy? So that's not what I'm saying. But the heart of this, there is something interesting there. Is it saying there should be discipline in a household? There should be some control. There should be guidance. You should set people on the right path. Discipline sets kids on the right path. Again, not advocating beating your kids, but some forms of discipline and guidance are good. And the adult should be in charge. The kid should not run the household. The kid should not get to do whatever they want. I've been subbing in AISD, and look, I love kids, and the kids are great. And in some ways, I miss getting to work with youth as much as I used to, and then other times I do not. But there's been times while I'm subbing where just in a moment of weakness, I'm like, man, they should really bring corporal punishment back. That would give a lot more control in the classroom. But it's only for a second. Because then the next second, I'm thinking, do I really want to give the government and government officials permission to beat my kids? I can't do that. That sounds like a bad idea. So I'm not really advocating for that. But sometimes there's no discipline in classrooms. Teachers, especially subs, they don't have much power. And some kids know that, and they use that to their advantage. I've heard of kids, from personal stories from a friend who's a teacher. I know there are stories of kids just standing up and getting in a teacher's face and saying, touch me, I dare you. I dare you. Knowing that teacher's bigger and stronger than them, but they know that kid knows I have an advantage. Because if this teacher does anything to me, if they touch me in any way, that teacher is done. So they're using things that are set to protect them. to their advantage. And again, not every kid's doing that. That makes this sound like, there's not all these bad kids. That's like just like an offshoot. That doesn't happen very often. But I also know, I've heard teachers express this. They are one false accusation away from maybe jail, but at best one false accusation away from a lot of humiliation. So in our effort to protect kids, which we should do, we're starting to overpower some of them to the point where it is hard to be a teacher. It is hard to be a teacher, especially in public schools. So those of you working in public schools, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. We know you're in a very hard situation where you want to bless kids and invest in them, but it's hard, it's tricky. And so public school is the backbone of society. I believe it's holding us together in a lot of ways, so thank you for what you're doing there. Because you can see that I use this as an example of a little way that we're starting to kind of disrupt the pecking order a little bit. And again, this isn't all like a hard and fast rule, but you can see it happening in schools a little bit. Kids are getting a little more power and a little more control, and it's being harder to be who's really in control there. This is partially one of the reasons why kids today, we see them not growing up as much. There's lack of discipline, and we're empowering them before they're ready. We do need to empower kids, but sometimes we're giving them power and authority that they're not ready to take. We're letting them make decisions that they haven't been trained on how to make. And so you can see when this pecking order of older teaching the younger kind of gets usurped, when the younger people are starting to have more control, society kind of gets disrupted. 2 weeks ago, we saw that in the story of Rehoboam, when the young people called the shots without ever listening, without hearing what's been handed down. Starts to be some problems. And so in Scripture, there's this clear, obvious pecking order. Older over younger, teacher over student, parent over child. But sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it's not happening. And we're empowering kids in a lot of ways that is good, but in a lot of ways that aren't. It's kind of like we're letting them drive when they're 8. And I know we're not really doing that. Actually, the opposite's happening there. We are giving them phones when they're 8. We're letting them make decisions that we should still be making. That's happening. We're letting kids make decisions that the parents should still be making. We're letting them be an authority when we should really say, no, this isn't a choice. You don't get this choice here. We need to be drawing those lines more. What's happening is kids are running the household. I've seen it. I saw this 13 years ago when I first became a youth minister. You can see how kids are running the household in a lot of ways. And look, this is, again, not a hard and fast rule. This is just a sample. I'm guilty of it in a lot of ways. I'm guilty. So there are some ways as a parent where I'm super soft. And it's harder when you have a pretty daughter who's slightly manipulative. She's sweet. I love her. She knows how to get her way. But it's clearly becoming a societal issue, right? It's becoming a societal issue. And so to kind of unpack this, I think what's important is when you see these things going on, figure out why is this happening? And I think if we ask why it's happening, that can kind of help us figure out maybe what we can do about this. And one is overcorrections from our outraising. A lot of us were raised by baby boomers. And baby boomers really like that passage in Proverbs that I showed you. So a lot of us are like, dude, I was spanked because my parents had a bad day at work. My parents were too hard on me. They didn't give me any choice. They didn't give me any control. And I'm not going to do that with my kids. I'm going to let my kids have more say. I'm going to empower my kids better, and I'm not going to punish them in those ways. I'm still wounded from the way I was punished. And I think those are all fair. That's actually all very fair. But maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit too far now. So we've overcorrected. Maybe that's what's going on in your house. Maybe. Another huge one, and to me, maybe even like number one is individualism. Maybe I could put hyper individualism in front of that. There's this idea like, hey, let people choose whatever they want. Let them express themselves. Let them be whoever they want. And I think that's good. And I remember as a young parent, that was like one of the things I was like, I really don't want to push anything on my kids. I want to let them decide who they are. Don't get mad at me. I don't love baseball, but I was like, if they want to do baseball, they can do baseball. I'm not going to make them be little versions of me, even though I think we all sort of do that anyway, right? We all push some of our things on them, no matter how much we try not to. But I think it's a good thing to not want to pressure them to be little versions of you, to let them decide. But we've kind of taken this idea so much, and we've twisted this idea of what love is. And now we kind of think like love is just totally letting people be their own unique individual in every single way. Love means never telling anybody they are wrong. That's sometimes the way our headspace has gone. Love means never telling anybody they should do anything differently. Love means never making them do anything they don't want to do. That one will get you in trouble. So we got this idea that love means, you don't love them if you're telling them to quit being themselves in any way. You tell them to quit being themselves in any way, it is unloving. Your kid just hit my kid. Well, they were expressing themselves. Like there are some places where we can say, hey, you know what? That's not the right way to express yourself. It's okay to do that, but this isn't how we do that. So what these scriptures are saying is sometimes love is hard. Sometimes love sets people in a direction. Sometimes love sets people on a right path. Sometimes love means setting them up for success, even if it means telling them something they didn't want to hear. Doesn't mean letting them do whatever they want with no guidance. No guidance and letting them just totally set their own path when they're young and not wise. You're setting them up for failure. That's not a loving thing to do. Sometimes you gotta, this is just huge. Sometimes you gotta make kids do what they don't want to do. Sometimes you have to, because otherwise they'll just eat gummy bears and be locked away in their room on a screen. You have to push people out of their comfort zones a little bit. You got to make them do new things, because you know what they might figure out? If you make them try new things that they said, I don't want to do that, they might figure out they're really good at it. They might figure out that they're really capable. They might figure out the world isn't as scary as they thought. But you got to push them and say, hey, no, the world's not that scary. You experience failure. You got to get back on the horse. Don't quit. Sometimes you can't give them a choice sometimes. You have to push them a little bit. If you're just saying whatever you want, you don't ever have to be uncomfortable, you do whatever, they're going to miss out on a lot of life. You're doing them a great disservice. And I wouldn't say it's unloving. I think that you're trying to love them in the way that you know how. I think there's some better ways here. And I think it's kind of what some of this stuff is getting at. And then I mentioned earlier, we have this obsession with youth. And because of that, we want to give young people stage time and screen time, and we want to have young people in all of our businesses. There's this cultural obsession with youth, but one thing I'm really seeing is with that is this obsession over childhood, maybe especially high school. High school is the best years of their life. And they have to experience every good thing they can experience in high school. They have to have the awesome prom experience. They got to have the awesome, in middle school, they got to have the awesome 8th grade trip to DC. They got to do all the sports they want. They have to have every part of the fun experience. And look, that's not bad. I mean, that's good. We want our kids to have a good time. But sometimes there's almost this like living vicariously through them. Like we want to give them everything that we had and then some. But what we do when we are so focused on having this great high school or middle school or childhood experience, we end up letting them kind of run things. We end up letting their schedule run our schedule. Their activities, their sports, their events dictates what the rest of the family does. I'm not saying that this always leads to entitlement, but that is subliminally sending the message. It is all about you. It is all about your schedule, and you dictate what the rest of this family does. You're letting the kids run the house if you obsess too much about them having that youth experience. And another one is parent guilt and fear. Guilt and fear are both typically not very good motivators in parenting. And you can go, there's all kinds of great media that'll tell you why you should feel guilty as a parent. They'll tell you why you should feel bad as a parent. It's all over the place. But sometimes we do have parent guilt, right? It's a thing. Oh, I'm not at home enough. Oh, I couldn't supply them with the thing. I want to get them these nice things and I can't. It's all hand-me-downs. Oh, I wish there wasn't so much turmoil in the household. And so sometimes when we have this guilt, this parent guilt, we end up compensating by spoiling them in some ways, by letting certain things slide that maybe maybe we shouldn't. Maybe it makes us softer parents. So sometimes that guilt can we end up letting kids run things. And then fear is another one. I'm afraid that if I make them do this, that if I push them to try again, that if I move them out of their comfort zones, that they're just going to fight against it. And look, that's not a totally unreasonable concern. I think as a parent, a lot of us have kind of weighed that. All right, how much do I push here? How much do I push here? But then there's some things where we just need to say, like, hey, you know what? This is what the family's doing, and this is how it is, and this is who you're going to be, and you're going to have to just sort this out. You're going to have to figure out a way to navigate this. I mean, we do that with a lot of things, right? With, like, eating healthy foods, and, like, school, and brushing our teeth. But a lot of times we don't do that with church and Bible class. We make that a total choice. And I mean, it feels bad. It just sounds bad saying, hey, it shouldn't be a choice. But to me, it shouldn't be a choice. This is something we do. This is something we do together. And if they don't like it, they'll find a way to navigate it. That's how I was. I didn't like going to church. I didn't like church. Look at me now. I figured it out. I figured out a way to like it. I figured out God was doing some cool things. Got some great relationships. And then the last one, this might be a real dangerous one. We have a desire to be liked. We have a desire, parents, teachers, ministers, adults have this desire, some of us have this desire, I think we all have a little bit of it, have the desire to be liked by the younger generations. And we think our way to do that is to let some things slide. Empower them a little bit. Don't be mean. Don't discipline. Don't be the bad guy. That's not how they're going to like you. But man, that is so unhealthy. I know there's some, I don't want to knock public school teachers too much, but I know I've heard some stories about some teachers that my kids have had. And I'm like, wow, it sounds like that teacher really wants to be liked by a sixth grader. And I feel sorry for him. And I remember, I'm full disclosure, I remember as a youth minister wanting to be liked, wanting to be praised, wanting to be the cool guy. That's really not healthy. It's not healthy for me, and it's really not healthy for any adult to really want the approval of a young person that bad. Because when you do that, you don't discipline, you let things slide, you don't give the guidance because you want to be the cool mom or the cool dad, the cool teacher, the cool minister. That's not healthy. That's a bad situation. Kids do not need you to be their best friend. You might want that. They don't need it. They need structure. They need consistency, and they need unconditional love, and you can do that. And you'll still be liked, maybe not in the way you want, but you'll still be liked. And then one more. Oh, look at that social media. I really just put it just because you guys knew it was going there. I'll let you figure out how it's to blame somehow, okay? We won't unpack it. And so I really want you to think, I want to challenge you at lunch or this week or as couples, work through. Do you agree with this stuff? I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule that everywhere you go, kids are running it, but you're starting to see it become an issue. Do you really think it's an issue? And then, do you agree with this? Is there some things that could be added here? I like this to generate some good conversation with you guys. But really, and this is harsh, but you're probably doing too much for your kid. You're probably doing too much for your kid. Adult parents, you're probably doing too much for your kid. Maybe you're picking up after them too much. Maybe there's no responsibility at home, like chores. Oh, they don't have to have chores. They're so busy with athletics and stuff. Hey, well, you know what? In the real world, it doesn't matter how busy you are outside of the home. You still have responsibilities at home. Doesn't matter how, well, but they're just so out with friends and they've been so busy having fun. They shouldn't have to. Yeah, they should. Do you really want them to go into married life, adult life, and be like, well, I don't have to do anything at home because I was out playing and doing sports? Now, sometimes life's hard and you got to do a little bit more there. Kids' schedules are running families. You need to think about that. How much does my world, my schedule, my time, our time as a family revolve around someone's sports? How often do you give kids money they didn't earn? I think that one happens a lot. We give kids money they don't earn, and then they don't know how to manage money. I remember as a youth minister so many times, it's like, oh, we're going to Sonic tonight. My parents gave me $20. I have to use it all. They always feel like they have to use it all. I'm like, no, you should give them change. You don't have to spend all of it. How often are you going to the teachers, coaches, ministers, and advocating for them? rather than having them go make those conversations, them go advocate for themselves? How often are you stepping in where maybe those are places you should be empowering them? So parents, I really want to challenge you. And I know not everybody's parents in here. I don't know. So I'm sorry. I know some things aren't as much for certain groups as they are others. But I really want to challenge you to think about how you need to be more of the parent. And again, this is for adult parents. My dad, I hate to admit it. In some ways, he's still parenting me. And so even for adult parents, how do you need to be parenting differently? How do you need to empower differently so that they can grow and make decisions on their own? How do you still need to give guidance? How have you overpowered them? You need to lovingly be their parent. Sometimes that means being the bad guy. How do you need to be more the bad guy? How do you need to set more consequences? How do you need to push them to do the hard things rather than you do it for them? How do you need to push them out of their comfort zones? What do you need to change? Where do you need intervention as a parent? Where do you need to encourage more faith and more spirituality? So the last bit in the verse, in the scripture reading verse, it says, make your parents proud. Have your parents rejoice in you. How do you do that? And don't you want that sometimes? Doesn't everybody in here, I think everybody in here in some way, wants to feel like their parents are proud of them? Don't you want your parents' approval just a little bit? Even if you're embittered towards them, even if they really bug you, everybody wants parent approval just a little bit, and we don't have that. It wounds us, and it hurts. It hurts to not feel that. Jesus was told, this is my son whom I love, with him I am well pleased. Essentially, Jesus was told, you're my son, I love you, and I'm proud of you. Twice. He's told that twice. You know why? Because you need to be told that more than once. Jesus was so human, he needed that. He needed that parent approval. But I love Proverbs 23, verse 24. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. Parents, what are you celebrating your kids for? We need to celebrate them for their wisdom, for their ability to buy truth, for their ability to accept instruction, even when it's, hey, you were wrong. That's a really hard one to hear, right? It's really hard to hear a criticism or hear, hey, you did something wrong and you need to change that. But to me, that's really where wisdom starts. I guess wisdom starts with listening, but then it also means hearing and being able to say, oh, I was wrong. I didn't do that well. I heard one of my kids came in the other day and said, hey, I'm really sorry. I understand how that came across and how that was hurtful, and I shouldn't have done that. And I was like, wow. You know what? That's more important than scoring a goal. And I need to celebrate that accordingly. That's showing wisdom. That's showing humility. That's being willing to accept instruction. That is being coachable. We need to celebrate those things. We need to celebrate their righteousness, how they handle issue with friends, how they're treating that kid at school that everybody picks on and nobody likes and everyone makes fun of. Oh, you're being kind to them? Dude, we should celebrate that. That is that looks like Jesus to me. We need to celebrate these things over their athletic prowess or getting that award. What are you celebrating in your kids? We have a God who one day we want to hear him say, well done, my good and faithful servant. We want our kids to hear that. Let's raise them in faith. Let's encourage faith. Let's model it. And with just a few minutes left, there's a whole other can of worms. Let's push it a little bit. Dare I say, let's indoctrinate them. I know that sounds really bad. I know that's how you can't indoctrinate your kids. And I know there's a whole nother side of child raising that I really want to push, is that you got to let them make their own faith decisions. You got to let them draw different conclusions about God and spirituality that are different than yours. And we got to make space for that and be okay with that. But hey, while they're young, let's tell them the basics truths. Let's raise them in the church. Let's do that. And let's, you know why? Because if you don't indoctrinate them, someone else will. Peers, people at school, teachers, strangers on the internet. Someone else will. And so it's okay to push some of that stuff, but leaving room leaving room for them to develop their own ideas. I think that's really important. It's a weird note to end on, but we have a God who is a good father. We have a God who wants us to raise our kids in faith, wants us to pass down faith. That's a hard thing to navigate. It's hard to know when to push and when to let there be freedom. And it's hard for parents. Because, to me, this isn't a message of, kids are dumb and parents need to put their foot down. I mean, maybe kind of. But really, what I'm getting at is, hey, parents, we probably need to do better. Hey, parents, we probably need to reevaluate a lot of things. So let's do that. If you were here this morning, maybe having nothing to do with anything that's been said, if you want to give your life to Christ, if you need prayers, maybe if you're ready to make changes in your household, if you have any need at all, we want to invite you to come now as together we stand and sing.